Welcome, everybody. Thank you for showing up today. We're so excited to get into this hour-long class on New York City open data. The purpose of our conversation today, in a nutshell, is to demystify and encourage the use of New York City open data in order to build data and digital literacy, as well as spread just awareness about this incredible data resource. We're going to do that first by talking about some top-line stuff, giving you some background on open data in New York City, before diving into some more advanced tools that will allow you to really grapple with and work with the data that the city produces. So to introduce myself, my name is Liam Zeya. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a City Service Corps member at the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics. I work primarily on the open data team, and I'm having a ton of fun learning about the city and learning about this work during my service term this year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Van Sharma, and I'm the year 2021 Civic Innovation Fellow at BetaNYC. NYC is a civic organization which is dedicated to improve the lives of New Yorkers through civic engagement, open data, technology, and design. In 2008, we began as a meetup, and now we have over 5,000 members. You can always check our website, beta.nyc, where we post monthly newsletters on technology, design, and data. Also, we have a Facebook group with over 900 people where we discuss advancements in civic technology and, again, data and design. We started out as a meetup in 2008. Our meetup was of civic technologists and good government that regularly came together. This created a community of advocates, hackers, and leaders. In 2012, we helped usher the open data law. And in 2013, in a citywide community co-authoring process, we collectively wrote the People's Roadmap to a digital NYC. Then fast forward to 2015, we were invited by MBPO to do Civic Innovation Fellowship. In 2021, we had our first virtual fellowship. And in this year, currently 2021, we're having our Open Data Ambassadors round. So our work is truly a collaborative effort involving depending on hundreds and thousands of individuals. So in a nutshell, we have three main buckets of work here at BetaNYC: our talent and career pipeline, then our research and tools, and lastly, our public engagement. And this is one of our early publications, which is People's Roadmap to Digital NYC, that still continues to guide us today. It says the fight is for the people to connect and empower themselves. Together, we can make this city safer, more resilient, efficient, and smarter. And we want all New Yorkers to be connected to the 21st century's opportunities. And this is what BetaNYC believes. So now we're going to talk about NYC government and open data.
I just want to give some background on New York City government before we dive into the open data stuff. So I think when we're talking about New York, as many of you probably know, I think this begins with just a story of scale, right? There are more than 8.6 million residents. Just to list some facts that I find interesting, more than 1 million kids in New York City schools. If those kids were a city, they'd be the 10th largest city in America. Close to 500,000 people live in public housing in New York City. That's essentially the city of Atlanta living in public housing here. And another stat that I like to share is that there are actually 18,000 miles of pavement and sidewalk. And just to give you some understanding of what that means, that's enough miles or mileage to go from here to Hawaii, to come back, and then to cross the Pacific and end up in San Francisco, just to give you some of that scale there. On the next slide, a little bit more about the New York City government itself. The mayor-council system and has basically a strong mayor form. In this system, the elected mayor, who is of course elected by the people of New York City, is given almost total administrative power and a clear, wide range of political independence and how the mayor operates. They have the power to appoint and dismiss department heads. They prepare and administer the city budget, although that budget must often be approved by the city council. Additionally, as you'll note on the top line of this graphic, there are some other elected officials in New York City government as well. This includes the public advocate, the comptroller, the various borough presidents, the district attorney, and of course, city council members. There's a council speaker, there's 51 members, and there's actually 35 committees within the city council. Now, below that in this chart, there are 50 plus agencies, offices, and commissions that make up the employees of New York City government. Over 325,000 tallied that work there. Once again, when we're talking about public open data, we can look at this chart and already get a sense that there's going to be a lot of data flowing from the operations of this large municipal government. With that, to zoom in a little bit to the open data stuff, sort of why we're here today, I just want to give you a quick background on the open data law as it exists here in New York City. So way back in 2010, the current Manhattan Borough President, Gale Brewer, when she was still a city council member, introduced the country's first municipal open data law. 2 years later, on March 7th, 2012, we just passed the 9-year anniversary of that, which is exciting. Former Mayor Bloomberg signed Local Law 11 of 2012, more commonly known as the Open Data Law. This amended the New York City Administrative Code to mandate that all public data be made available on a single web portal by the end of 2018. And a reminder, this was in 2012. And just a note here, in many other cities, open data is a technical policy or an executive order. But in New York City, it's the law. And so we feel that it has a lot of teeth in that sense. Then in 2015, 2016, and 2017, Mayor de Blasio approved several amendments to the open data law. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but I think these are some important details before we move into the other stuff. These amendments included strong requirements on data dictionaries and data retention. They set limits on response timelines for public requests and actually extended the open data mandate, which makes it easier, I think, for the rest of New York City government to access city data and to anchor the city's transparency initiatives around the open data program. So that's just some top line background. And just a quick snapshot of New York City open data today. It's jointly administered by two city agencies, the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, which is where I'm a city service corps member. They're known as MODA, and the the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. Those two teams jointly administer the open data program. That team works with a network of about 100 open data coordinators who are staff at these city offices, agencies, and commissions who are responsible for identifying and sharing New York City's open data from these various offices and agencies. And so as a result, we've seen a lot of progress with this program. Thanks to the hard work of the open data coordinators at all these agencies, we now have more than 3,000 data sets up on the portal. Close to 300 were published just in the last year. And in 2020, we saw more than 1.5 million visitors to the open data portal. So we're happy about the progress and the growth of this program. We think this is something to celebrate. Many other cities have followed suit, modeling their open data legislation on what New York has to offer. And every year, New York City celebrates the law with actually a birthday party to correspond with New York City School of Data. The New York City School of Data is organized by BetaNYC in partnership with New York City's open data team at MODA. Typically, as in past years, the conference has kicked off the city's Open Data Week. This year, you're at an Open Data Week event, which is great. The New York City School of Data / Home School of Data, which this event is a part of, is rolled into the operation of Open Data Week. So there are really high quality events happening throughout the week in a virtual setting, typically, that you can join. So we're really excited about this, and we're excited that you're here once again. So before I hand it back off, just to sum up, we've been talking about government a little bit, and I want to turn the conversation back to data. We think open data, refers to government data, and in a nutshell, it's basically meant to make government more transparent and accountable to the public. We think that good policy needs good data.
One of the largest data sets on the NYC open data platform, which is the NYC 311. And I'm sure most of you New Yorkers already know about what 311 is, but if any of you is hearing it for the very first time, 311 is a service by the government of New York City to provide its residents with a resource for assistance and general information outside of emergency matters. So it's open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It is available in over 175 languages. It gives access to 172 agencies with almost 3,600 government sources. Also, 311 is accessible via phone, web, Skype, Twitter, Facebook, and mobile apps. So the data set is huge. And in 2021, it has almost 25 million service requests, which is a lot of requests. And also, because this is a people's data set, it has a lot of information about complaint types, for example, illegal parking or noise issues or heat and water issues. So because of that, it is referred to as the people's data set. That's enough about 311. And now we're going to talk about a tool, BoardStat, that actually pulls that data from NYC 311. So BoardStat is a highly interactive tool for community boards that empowers users to discover issues and trends within their district boundaries. It also empowers board staff and members to gain timely insights into NYC 311 data, and is furthering the long-standing goal of making government transparent, reactive, and moving beyond open data access to meaningful use. When simply stated, BoardStat is a multi-page dashboard customized for each NYC borough and community district, where data is updated nightly directly from the NYC's open data portal. So now here is how you get to the tool. Now, whatever search engine you're using, Safari, Google Chrome, you just have to type in the URL, which is boardstatbeta.nyc, and it will take you to the landing page. So on this slide, you can see the landing page. There's a brief description about the tool. And on the top, you can see that the 5 boroughs of NYC listed over there. So BoardStat has too much data to have one for the entire city. So each borough has its own. Select one of these boroughs so that the 311 data sets are narrowed down to a specific borough, and you're ready to use the tool. And for this section of the class, we'll be focusing on the borough of, all right, so after you select Brooklyn, you are directed to the first page of BoardStat. Now, this is how the first page looks. And let's first get comfortable with the layout of the page. So the purple tab on the left side is a preview of different pages, and there are a total of 8 pages. And on the first page is purely for setting up filters on your data set. For example, you can select a specific community board from the drop-down list. And for today's class, we'll be focusing on the community board 1. Similarly, you can add filters based on complaint type, agency status, and descriptor. Also, another point to keep in mind when using BoardStat is that the filters that you select in the first page continues to stay active throughout all the pages, which means that if you apply filter of CB1 Brooklyn on the first page, then every other page will show the right. Now we head to the page 2. Once you have filtered your dataset to community board, you can click on page 2 on the purple tab, and it will take you to view by complaints. Now this page gives you a broad overview of the data. And to get most recent results, the date range has been set between Jan 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2021. Now, first on the upper left side, there is a visualization in the form of a bar graph for 10 complaint types in CB1. And in this slide, it shows that the most complaints are for noise residential, which are almost 10,000 in number, followed by the complaints of noise street and illegal parking. Then we have a table just below the bar graph that displays the count of requests for each complaint type along with its descriptor. And there is another table to the right that shows the count of requests by addresses. For example, in this slide, the top address is 811 Flushing Avenue, which has the highest number of requests. That is 762. And lastly, on this page, we have a map section with a lot of overlapping bubbles on it. And each bubble represents an address in that community board was associated with some kind of complaint. Now, in this slide, we are on the page 3. And on this page, you can look up an address and pull up its entire history of 311 complaints. In this slide, the requests are shown for address 811 Flushing Avenue. So first, let's take a look at the visualizations here. First, there we see that there is a tree map showing top 10 complaints for the address 811 Flushing Avenue. And the top complaint is displayed in a green square, which represents noise residential. So there are other color rectangles as well, which are right next to the big green square showing other complaint types. Again, bigger the square, more the number of complaints. Then on the rightmost side, there is a line of chart descriptors spread over 10 years from 2010 to 2020. And also, if you notice that there is a spike in 2020 for noise residential complaints, which is interesting. And lastly, at the bottom, we have a 311 service request data that contains various columns like unique key, created date, incident address, complaint type. And also one thing to keep in mind is that BoardStat is highly user interactive. So if you can click around all these charts and tree maps and tables. So if you click the yellow rectangle over here, it will narrow that and it will show you the results for that particular complaint type in the table and as well as in the chart as well. Okay, next we navigate to the page 4, which is called Explore Map. Here, you can locate hotspots or service requests, clusters of specific complaint types or emergency, non-emergency complaints. The bubbles or circles on this map shows the different addresses of complaints. So if there are too many bubbles or circles in an area, that means the neighborhood has a lot of requests. Also, if there is a comparatively large bubble, then that means the address has a high amount of complaints. For example, here we see a large gray circle, and when you hover over it, it indicates a problematic site of noise commercial. Okay, so now here we have filtered the complaint types to noise commercial. Though all the complaints fall under this complaint type, the bubble have different colors, right? So this is because each complaint type can have different descriptors. For example, the bubbles have blue colors and some of them have gray, right? So blue is for music/party complaints, whereas gray is for pounding noises. And in this slide, there are multiple filters are set on complaint type, where whenever there's more than one complaint type, the bubbles change to pie charts. So when you hover over these circles, it displays the count of requests. And now in the slide, we are looking at both noise commercial as well as non-emergency matters. An example of non-emergency complaint is social distancing or people not wearing masks. So the orange part of the bubble indicates non-emergency matter, whereas blue part indicates noise residential complaints. Okay, so now let's move to the next page. Right, so this is the page 5 of BoardStat. This page represents a distribution of agencies and service request ticket status. So basically on this page, you'll be able to see the average closing time for a ticket. And by default, it shows the average closing time for every agency. And again, the BoardStat is highly interactive, so you can click on a specific agency and see the average closing time for that particular agency. And finally, we have page 8 that allows you to compare different complaint types and descriptors. For example, the green bars that you see here are, first of all, the entire chart is spread over the year of 2020. So the green bars here show non-emergency complaint types, and the orange bars here show non-compliance with phase reopening. And the blue bars here for the months of June and July have a little question mark here, and that means we have a question for you. What do you think? Please type your answers in the chat. What do you think the blue bar represents? What sort of complaint type? I'm sure most of you guys already know the answer, but I'm going to give you a little, if you can go back to the year of 2020 and recall from the months of June and July, if anything sticks out from newspapers or news or annoying neighborhood noises, if you can remember anything. So I'm not able to see the chat section right now, but Liam and Z, please let me know, guys, if they got it. They got the answer. I'm going to pause for like a couple of seconds just to see if they got it.
One guess about protests.
Protest.
Noise.
Noise, now not quite close, but I'm going to show the answer now. The answer is illegal fireworks. There are a lot of news about illegal fireworks last year. Yeah.
That tutorial on BoardStat was fantastic. Want to really emphasize that that's an incredibly intuitive and useful and very visual tool, and I encourage you all to try to use it yourself or back to your local neighborhoods. But now I want to turn to the source of the data itself, the New York City Open Data Platform, which, as we talked about earlier, was brought online in 2012. I think to frame this part of the conversation, to be a really informed public, we don't want to exclusively rely on visualizations and charts that are already out there in newspapers, on Twitter, online, etc. Those visualizations have value, of course, but every visualization carries its own story, its own biases. And so here, with this tutorial on BoardStat and now the Open Data Platform, what we want to do is give you the tools to investigate and analyze data yourself, so you can get to the bottom of what you want to learn. So the first step is to get into your Google machine and type in New York City Open Data. You'll be taken to our homepage here, and you'll note on the top there is actually an option to sign in. If you're using this site for the first time, we generally recommend it. It's a good practice, useful for saving data sets and being part of the New York City open data community. However, it's not something that is necessarily required for just playing around with data sets. And this next slide will show this is what it will look like. You just sort of sign up and create an account. You'll be good to go. So the first step, I guess, is to search some data. So there's thousands of data sets, as we mentioned. There are countless topics of interest, so much information on urban community issues around New York City. For this sort of walkthrough that we're going to do today, we've already talked about 311 earlier, so let's just stick with that. And so what you want to do first is to type 311 into the search bar. You'll then be pushed to a screen on the next slide that looks like this. So you'll get back a list of results related to the keyword that you put into the search bar. For this exercise, we're going to click the data set titled 311 service requests from 2010 to present. When you click that, and then when you click any data set, you'll be taken to what is called the primer page. And so the primer page is basically a very high level summary of the important things you might want to know about a particular data set. So you'll see circled on this slide, it was last updated February 25th, 2021. That's just because, as a side note, that's the date that this screenshot was taken. The update frequency, you'll note, is daily. It has 442,000 views. You'll note that the agency that made this data set public, it's obvious in this situation, but is 311. And you can even see the date this data set was originally made public. October 8, 2011. It's almost a decade old, which is something pretty incredible. Now, to view the data itself, you'll note the blue circle just now, the blue view data button. So you can go ahead and do that to get into the actual data set. So this is what the data looks like on the portal. So we can see here, look at it from a high level, we can find out some pretty interesting information here. So it has 41 columns, so basically 41 fields that tell you different things about each service request. It has 24.5 million rows. And so I think a good practice when we're looking at a big data set like this is to ask, okay, what does a row, what does an entry in this data set symbolize? Here, each row is a different service request that was made to 311. So more than 24.5 million of those. And then you'll also note that 311 complaints are grouped into different complaint types. And so you can see that towards the right, just circled there. And hopefully you can read that by things like noise vehicle, noise street sidewalk, etc. And so as a matter of fact, in that category, on the next slide, there are actually 446 different complaint types in New York City 311 data. So they represent a wide variety of issues across all 5 boroughs. And now related to the Brooklyn Community Board 1, which we were talking about, here are the top 24 issues as they appear in that community board boundary. So you'll note familiar things: noise residential, illegal parking, street conditions, indoor sewage, abandoned vehicles, overflowing litter basket, you could go on. And so these are things potentially, if you've lived in that neighborhood or if you live in New York City, potentially things you can think about and maybe you have come across in your own life before too. Now, next step, and this is something I think if from the New York City Open Data platform piece of this presentation, I think this is maybe the single most important thing I'd like you to take away. And this is learning how to filter data. It's a really important skill to have if you want to start to understand the data in your local community or in your neighborhood, particularly with a massive data set like the 311 data. As we mentioned, millions and millions of records. We need to use this skill, the filter or the filtering, to gather insights from all that data. To demonstrate this, we'll go through a couple of different levels of filtering. So first, we just want to ask ourselves, how many calls have been made? How many sort of calls, aka service requests, have been made to 311 in Brooklyn Community Board 1? So what we do is we basically go to the top right of the page here when you're in the data set, and you click filter as much as is circling there. You then go down and add the contents community board is 01 Brooklyn. And so you'll note when we apply that bottom circle there, we've gone from 25 million records down to a little under 540,000. So 540,000 is still a lot, but it's way fewer than the original data set, the aggregate data set of everything since 2010. Then we want to add additional filters, right? To drill down and learn about more specific things. And so what we're doing here is I'll explain the text first. So as the slide says, these are all the 311 calls made in Brooklyn Community Board 1 after December 1st, 2020, assigned to the Department of Sanitation. And so how we did that was back to the right side of the screen where we originally entered in the Brooklyn CB01 filter. We're going to create some additional filters on top. So we want to say the created date is after 12/01/2020 at 12 a.m., meaning that we're only going to see inquiries that came in after that date and time. And we're going to add another filter on that. The agency is the Department of Sanitation. So DSNY is the abbreviation. And then if you look at the number of records that are now in this filter data set, which is what we call it, you'll see, what is that number? 687, right? So we went from 24 point something million to 687. And now we have this really specific information about these very specific types of complaints that have been made in this very specific area in a specific time frame after December 1st to an agency, right? And so that may empower advocacy and may empower change in our community. And the first step here is to be armed with the information from New York City Open Data. Congrats. So we have finished with the filtering piece and want to pause here and field any questions you all might have about 311 data, the Open Data platform, or filtering or managing data in that system.
So Larry asked, how is open data collected? How is it cleaned? And where are the attributes defined with a high level of specificity to leave no question of how an attribute can be interpreted? Like the simple answer to that is that all open data sets have a landing page, and in that landing page it tells you the frequency of how often the open data set has been updated. It has a metadata file that will tell you about the columns and what they mean. But a professor that is really like embracive of open data explained to me this in really good terms, that open data is not necessarily for your purposes, it's for the agency's data collecting purposes. It's really up to you to contact the data owners at the agency to really figure out all the nuances and all that stuff, or for you to figure out what the city doesn't collect for that data set. So yeah, it's sometimes very hard for open data sets if you want to do analysis, but in other cases, there are really awesome people in the agency that will help you out.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, thank you for that great answer, Zeya. We'll talk about this in a few minutes and when we get into the other resources page, but there is a help desk on the New York City Open Data site where you can ask questions about a specific data set. And those questions are forwarded to the open data coordinators, aka the data owners at that specific agency, who can give you some more expertise in their answers. And additionally, there's also a function for you to request a data set through that same help desk. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, thanks again, Z. And I think if there are no other questions, we can keep moving. So just wanted to, again, there are over 3,000 data sets on the New York City Open Data Portal. Here are some of the really, I think, timely and interesting ones that our team is looking at a lot. COVID-19, of course, daily counts of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in New York City, minority and women business owners sort of certification list, and the evictions list, all things that have been particularly pertinent in the last year as the pandemic has been hitting the city. And so we definitely encourage you to go here at nyc.gov/open data to search topics that interest you. And if you have questions, you'll note in the contact us form right above the helmet on the picture of the person on the website, that's our help desk. And we encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or requests at all. And yeah, I'll pass it back to Manj.
Okay, thanks, Ian. So this was our intro class. And if you'd like to learn more about open data or BoardStat, and also if you want to teach this class, you can also sign up to be a part of the NYC Open Data Ambassadors program at the website of BetaNYC. And also, if you need any sort of assistance with data, for example, if you need help navigating your data set, you can submit a RADAR. A RADAR stands for Research and Data Assistance Request. So you can go to the link provided in the slide, and you can also submit a request for that. Additionally, there is yet another tool called How's My Driving News, which helps you find traffic violations by license plate. So you can check this out by simply going to the website, which is howsmydrivingny.nyc. And you can take a look at justfix.nyc, which co-designs and builds tools for tenants, housing organizers, and legal advocates fighting displacements in NYC.
So just a few more resources from the New York City Open Data side. This is what I just mentioned a couple of slides ago in response to Larry's question. This is a screenshot of the Open Data Help Desk. Should you have any questions about what something in a data set means or how you can find data on a particular topic that's interesting to you, if you can't find it just through a simple search, please reach out to us and send us a note via the Open Data Help Desk. A couple other things. We also have the New York City Open Data Project Gallery. And so this is a feature of our program that we're really excited about. Features open data related projects that have been created by members of the public, activists around the city, and some government employees too. And so when people do something cool with open data, you can submit it, and we may feature it on our site. We really like to different people's creative work in that way. One really cool example from this past year is sidewalk widths. So this was built with it starting the baseline from the sidewalk planimetrics open data dataset. And the person who created this incredible project calculated the center of each sidewalk segment and ultimately each sidewalk's width. And as you see from the screenshot, I basically mapped that onto a map of New York City. And so the different colors represent different widths. And this was just something, of course, especially pertinent at a time where social distancing in this past year has been extremely important, to say the least. Additionally, this I may not need much introduction because you are currently in the midst of Open Data Week, but every year there's an Open Data Week festival in March to celebrate the original signing of that law. Please check out the website. There's tons more events happening through Sunday of this week. And thanks again for coming and being here. And then finally, before I pass it back over, if I encourage you to read or at least check out New York City's Open Data for All 2020 report. This was released in September of 2020. This report is released on an annual basis. And basically, it contains detailed updates on the progress of open data's strategic initiatives, which have been outlined in the past, and also just general updates on all things open data. So you hear from open data coordinators at different agencies. You get to see highlights. There's lots of visuals. It's a fun thing to read. And they also talk about the future of open data in New York City, what the goals are for the coming year and beyond. So again, if you want a central source with a lot of general information, but also this is the thing to check out. And that's at the homepage of our website as well. Yeah, and so that's it for me on the open data side.
Thanks, Liam. So lastly, you can check out this Google Doc that we find very useful that contains links to all the resources that we mentioned today in our class, in addition to all the BetaNYC resources. And here is a link to the document, so make sure you check that out.
Hey, this is Justin. I work at a nonprofit called The Shed, and I just want to say thanks for doing all this. I'm super interested and hearing it broken down. It was super intimidating, but this is really helpful. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Justin. Thank you all for the wonderful questions.